Mr. Bell.
Here.
Mrs. Backlund.
Here.
Mr. Bashada.
Here.
Mr. Brzezinski.
Here.
Mr. Syak.
Here.
Mrs. DePinto.
Here.
Mrs. Rakuya.
Here.
Mrs. Kraft.
Here.
And Mr. McEnroe. Mr. McEnroe.
Yes, President.
Executive session this evening. Under negotiations, Board of Education discussed the SEA contract status, changes to the school calendar under attorney-client privilege, SEA personnel matters, SEA grievances, and role of the board president.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Alfano, do you have a presentation? You want to do the morning? Yes.
I'd like to have a moment of silence, Mr. McEnroe, for one of our past principals who was at Washington School and the junior high school at Sable War Memorial High School, Rita Whitney. So I'd just like to take a moment of silence.
Thank you. Approval of minutes, everybody should receive the copy of the regular and executive session, November 28, 2012 meetings. I know they were posted to the portal as well.
Mr. President, under correspondence, which is right before that, can we just get the Adele O'Hara letter that we received regarding some trees on the Truman School property under correspondence?
Certainly will.
That was in our packet tonight. And we'll be addressing that issue, or is that our property where the trees need to be taken care of?
Just like everything else that's occurred, Mr. Pantaleon is trying to address the issues as he's trying to address the safety issues first. This appears to be sitting in a vacant land, so he's aware of it and he will address it once he has the opportunity.
Is it Truman, I'm sorry.
It's by the Truman School.
Right, but is it Truman property? Is it Board of Ed?
Right now, it's Truman, it's hard to explain, but there's a triangular piece of property next to Truman. That is our property that's there. So yes, it is our property.
Okay.
And will we be getting a letter back there, just acknowledging receipt of her correspondence? And
I
that will
believe we may have already stopped to see her.
But that's fine,
But I'll follow.
as long as it's been addressed. Thank you.
Getting back to the minutes, anybody have any changes, additions, deletions from the minutes?
Yes.
This is for
Under discussion, please add that I made comments thanking our staff and students for their help in the aftermath of the storm.
Yep, I had that already.
Thank
Thank you.
anyone else?
Yeah, Lydia,
Yes.
didn't Kevin make a motion, I seconded on the calendar change that was later amended by Jill?
Yes, I
Is it referenced? I didn't see it.
have to check.
The change I know was in there. I'm not sure if all the amendments and who made them was accurate.
Trying to, was under policy?
It should be under curriculum.
I can't even find it, so I apologize. Have the motion by Mrs. Trapp, second by Mrs. Rakuya to change it. I guess you're correct. There was an item to table, but then someone over.
I think it was a two-stage change. We started by changing it to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of Easter week.
Why don't we do this? Instead of trying to figure out what it was,
Table it?
I'll just remove the minutes, withdraw the minutes from this meeting for now. And then I'll look into it. You're correct, there were two motions. Maybe one of them did get missed, so instead of trying to figure it out here,
Take
why
a
don't we
motion
just
to,
withdraw the minutes?
Student council representative, Tony.
Do we have to vote on that? That we withdrew?
No, I'm withdrawing.
Because there was no motion ever approved.
No motions ever approved.
How we doing?
Currently, we are organizing the Toys for Tots fundraiser for those affected by Hurricane Sandy. We will be singing Christmas carols and delivering toys to homeless shelters in an effort to raise their holiday spirit. Furthermore, the Bombers football team will be attempting to win their third consecutive state title on Saturday at 4 o'clock at Rutgers Stadium. We will also be collecting toys there, and we hope to see you there. And a lot of the senior class has been wondering about the status of the class trip, whether we're going to have it or not, because none of the teachers have given us any information on it yet.
The Board of Education doesn't determine whether there's going to be a senior trip or not. Comes from the high school administration. My understanding is that Mr. Brown wants to have the senior trip. There were some issues that occurred last year that Mr. Brown is doing a corrective action on, and as soon as he presents that to the board will deliberate on it. I can speak to myself only about the senior trip. I support the senior trip, always have. 3 of my kids all went on their senior year, and I don't want to deprive that from someone else, but there are some things, more information that we need. And once we get that from the high school administration, the board, hopefully at our next meeting, will be approving it. Dr. Alfano, is that seem doable?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the status.
Thank you.
So by the next meeting, will it be on to approve or not approve, or?
The plan is, yes, the plan is for Mr. Brown to provide the information I requested from him. Once that's done and Mr. DeAndre takes a look at it, I'm going to get it to the board members to look at it way before the next meeting, and then we'll have that on the agenda for us to vote on, yes. That's the plan. Okay. Anything else, Tony?
No, that's it.
Thank you. Okay, Dr. Alfano, your report, please. There's no district highlights?
No, not for this meeting.
Dr. Alfano?
Thank you, Mr. McEnroe. Buildings and ground, 2 high school use of buildings, 1 for a town hall meeting and 1 for the mayor and council reorganization meeting. Any question with those 2 uses?
I have a question.
Sure.
It's more of a request. Since we've been getting so many requests to use the auditorium, I remember last year the middle school used it for a play, and I saw ushers going around asking people not to eat or drink in the auditorium. But then I was at another function, and I saw everybody with Dunkin' Donuts bags. Could we get a permanent sign instead of a piece of paper that says no food allowed?
Sure. Good idea.
On the doors, maybe?
Like outside the auditorium so that it's clear?
I think as part of the approval, we should make sure that Ms. Hospodar make sure that the people understand that there is no eating or drinking.
See, at the high school play this past weekend, they announced it continually, that it's very nice, please don't eat or drink. But I was in that room once before where I saw people and nobody was policing.
I mean, the best I can do is ask the building principal, since they're the ones that oversee these functions, to have.
I know, but a lot of times there's
No.
food sold that people bring in. I think at least if we had a sign, at least.
No, that's what I'm saying, I'll work
with
with them, because they know where to appropriately put them in their buildings. So I'll work
The
with them
sign.
to get
But
signs up.
you're okay with getting some?
Yeah,
That's
we'll work
all
that
I
out,
just
that's what I'm saying, I'll work with them.
2, 1 for
You're
each door?
speaking specifically for the high school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Is there another one?
No, because he was saying building principals. We were talking about
Just
specifically this
you.
building.
Right, building principal,
Yeah.
Mr. Brett.
Okay.
Right.
Because they sell food right outside the event.
Right, which is why I know at the high school, at the play, the director specifically said, there's food out there, but you can't bring it in, please don't bring it in, it's brand new.
More or less like the football game where they continually make the announcement, no smoking
smoking.
allowed on the property.
Yeah.
I'll speak to them.
But we seem to be
Sort of
letting it
large
out
area.
more frequently, so.
Certainly.
Okay, Dr. Fun, section B.
Section B, numbers 1, 2, and 3, actually is good news. We're going out to look to refund the bonds. We could save approximately $1.5 million if everything comes off right. Number 2 is to put a bond attorney and counsel together with a maximum of $10,000. Number 3, which is on page 7, is the board's financial advisor, which is Phoenix Advisors. And 1, 2, and 3 is definitely something we should do. And the rates keep dropping, so we're going to refinance. 4 and 5 is the abolishment of secretarial positions and the creation of 2. So those are as listed. Change order number 3 is a credit for the heating system at the middle school. Number 7, I will defer to Ms. Eichner to talk a little bit about the Education Jobs Act, Corrective Action Plan, and Audit Report.
Back in August, July 31st, I think, and August 1st, monitors came in from the state to monitor all our federal grants, Titles 1, 2, 3, Perkins Grant, and Ed Jobs, and the IDEA. They went through, it was very extensive, we had about 20 people in for 2 full days, and they had a number of findings. We just received their report, and you received a copy of their report, and you also received the corrective action plan, which we're which we must approve tonight so that we can send that back to them. So, any questions?
I have questions. Are
Sure.
they for you?
Yeah, or in video, we'll
figure it out.
figure it out.
Okay. I thought the corrective action plan was quite extensive. I mean, there was quite a lot of numbers. Is there, and it was pretty vague, like say, we'll implement a process to ensure purchase orders are issued. So, like, if just using the first one as an example. So if I read this, it says purchase orders will be issued upon board approval of grant-funded professional development before the staff member attends the workshop. So is that saying that we're doing it backwards?
And again, and this one, and Marilyn and I spoke, we contemplated actually asking for an appeal on it. What they commented on was that we approve the individuals to attend a meeting. What we don't do is we don't tell them immediately put in that requisition to secure the money. We tell them after you go, when you file your report, they're required to file a professional development report or a conference report. They get mileage reimbursement and they get reimbursement for the day, for the conference. We say just do that all at once when you submit it.
As we do with all professional development, that's how we do it with all our professional development.
And
The requisition is not processed until they've already attended the conference and they've met all the requirements. Now, what they want us to do for the ones that are funded by the grant, Title I, Title II, Title III, is to issue the requisition before the teacher attends the conference. So once it's board approved, like tonight you're approving several of them. So the new process that we've initiated is that tomorrow morning, my secretary, Debbie Cooper, will go in, begin the requisition process on those professional development days that are funded through the grant. But nothing will actually be processed until the teachers actually attend. But we will have the requisition into the system. And this is our understanding of how they want us to do it. So it's different than what we do for all other professional development. This will apparently meet their requirements.
There just was like, and then it said there were a lot of expenditures that had to be reversed. When was the last time this was done here?
I believe 3 or 4 years ago, we had them on the
I
process.
believe in 2009, and the really ironic part is that all of the expenditures which were disallowed were all expenditures that had been approved in previous monitorings. None of these were anything new, and these were listed in the grant application, which was approved.
Talking to a couple of other board members in different districts about this, a lot of districts that we didn't do too poor compared to other districts. It appears that the rules changed, because I know like Study Island or whatever it was that was mentioned was specifically okay, it was approved to do that, now the rules changed and you're written up to do it.
Correct.
The federal government, under this jobs fund program, is my understanding, is kind of putting the screws to the state, and in turn, they're going to the district saying, well, I know we approved you to do that, but now you can't do that.
Right.
So instead of saying that, they're just writing up as a finding, so if you look at this, you say, well, why did we do that, when in the past, it was approved?
Correct.
So, and this was, which year was this? This was 2012, right?
This was the 11-12 school year for last year. And what happened, because the grant period ends on the end of August of that same month, we scurried to make sure. And all of the expenditures that they cited, we reversed while they were sitting there.
Right, but they say unallowable expenditures. They were allowable until
Yes.
they changed the rules.
Correct. And they were, Stony Island was listed in the grant
Right, specifically
application.
listed, right. And it was
Specifically,
specifically approved.
and it was approved.
Can you appeal that?
You know what, we tried verbally with them there, and you don't want to mess with this office of OFAC, you really don't. There is one thing that we are, well, there are two things we're appealing. One was in my area of the grant, ETTC, which provided technology professional development, and many of our teachers went to that. We use Title I and Title II funds to purchase the vouchers. In the purchase order, you call them membership vouchers, because that's what ETTC called them. They are trying to say that that money was for membership, not for professional development. So that we are appealing, because that was, it was clearly professional development.
And from our, and following up to Mr. Aguirre's comment, from our perspective, I mean, other than reducing the number of findings, an appeal wouldn't really have any significant value because we didn't lose any money as a result of this. Basically, what they're saying is if they're disallowing now Study Island, we get that money back and we will just use it on a different approved expenditure.
Correct.
So appealing it will only just prolong the
Right, it will prolong the process and it will not make us many
friends along the way.
And it will not help us even when they come into the future. So we back the money out. It will be carried over for this year. The money's not gone. We carried it over to this year's grant. And we're not obviously putting in for Study Island or any of those expenditures they did not allow.
Okay, but so you reversed the charges for Study Island, you reversed the charges for professional development, you took them out of these Title Is. Where are those charges now then if they're disallowed?
They were adjusted as of 6:30, and all the reports that you received for June of 2012 were all charged back to the operating account because they were disallowed as a grant.
As a grant? Okay, so they're charged the operating account. Now, the grant, so then did our grant numbers go down?
The grant expenditure
Just
amount
went down.
went down, yes.
And so where is that difference sitting in Title II or wherever
No,
right now?
yes, the money got put back into the grant, and as Marilyn indicated, now carried over. You get to carry it over and now use it in the 12-13 year when she files an amendment based on those carryover amounts.
So what that did was decrease our surplus number? in
Yes,
effect?
yes.
Do you have a dollar amount associated with
we
these
worked today,
reverse
Marilyn.
charges?
I think we figured out that was about 65,000.
Yeah, around that.
Total, roughly.
And if I could, I mean, been a business administrator for 17 years and auditor for 10. By far, this was one of the worst experiences I've ever been put through. When you think you have 20 people in the room, and Marilyn and I were basically the brunt of their questions, pulling you in different directions and saying, I need this, I need that, and sometimes it was hard to get an explanation across because you had two people over your shoulder waiting to get another question in. They were looking at 100% compliance, which makes it even more difficult. So it's your audit, your regular audit is based on sampling. These folks came in and did 100%. So obviously, things they found, we even sat and said, you know, are they really nitpicking or not? And that's where we drew the line saying, how much do we challenge, how much do we not? Because you have to draw that line and say, okay, they're the monitors, they know the rules of the game a lot better than we do. They do it every day. So we had to respect their opinion, and we had a mutual agreement. We were going to use this as a learning experience also, which I think they also appreciated. Because we said, we're not here to fight, we're here to learn and make sure that we're in compliance. And I think they appreciated that that's the method that we wanted to use, that we weren't going to hold back on things.
Well, when they did this a few years ago, was it the same thing, 100%?
No.
Did they do it the same fashion?
A few years ago, they came in, Title I person came in, then maybe a Title II person came in. I don't recall ever seeing a Perkins person. So you got to remember, you had 5 different areas of people coming in with an expertise in only that area. And they all sat in the room and did their part. And, you know, who's pulling vouchers? And while Title I had one voucher, people in Title II had another one. And we're trying to get it out of them to give it to them. You know, so it was a madhouse for 2 days. But it was, in my mind, it was a good experience because we did learn something from the process, and sometimes you have to take these monitoring processes as a learning experience, because as Mr. McEnone indicated, it seems to be a trickle down because the state also had this, so it's a follow through. When you look at some of the recommendations, they were consistent amongst many districts. When you looked at other districts, the wording was exact, everything exact word for word. So they had standard ones, they knew what they were writing up. And it's a good process that we learned from, and you have to make some adjustments, and we're going to make them to assure them that they work. And I know one district actually, as Marilyn indicated, wrote that they were going to do a summer school tutorial in the grant. It got approved. Monitors came in, disallowed it, and there was not much they can do about it.
And do you have a time frame when they'll return to do this again? Or?
Hopefully never.
Although it's not something they do every 3 or 4 years.
They may, we don't know the process, that's the thing.
They just started this type of process, I believe this year from what I
Yes.
understand, this type of monitoring.
Did they give you a copy of the new rule book, so when we,
Well, everything they cited, in the report, they cite where they get it from.
Right.
And how long was this audit? How long were they?
2 solid days.
2 solid days.
2 solid days with about 20 people.
So with 570 some districts in the state, they probably won't be back for a while.
Well, we don't know that, and our goal is that if they do, they can find everything in place and they can move on and go on to another
well, we
district.
didn't
That's
lose
our
any
goal.
money. We lost no money.
No, not at this stage.
But now,
Absolutely.
some of the corrective actions, as like update software and make these changes, do we have the financial impact that these changes are gonna make? Is there one?
There are none.
There are none?
No, you have to understand, most of these things were internal procedures that we used that they did not like. And that's what it really came down to. It's some of the things, they just didn't like the process. As we said, professional development, we said, instead of putting in one at the beginning and one at the end, we said, just do it at the end, save the paperwork. They said, no, you must encumber, and when you read the regs, it's clear. You must encumber the expenditures when they are committed. So yes, so it's one of those things, and it's a process that you learn by and you make your adjustments.
Okay, moving along. Number 8 is basically a special education report that we did very well on. We're just approving that report. That's just a requirement that we have to do for the state. Number 9 is a revision to the holiday schedule for the custodians and maintenance people. There is an adjustment in the architect who has done the roof at the Eisenhower, the amount of $13,000, and there's an appropriation for the New Jersey non-public school technology, which is a grant of $3180. I believe that's 5 or 6 computers that they're getting. And then I'm going to defer, if there's any questions for someone, to defer to the attorney to do numbers 12 and 13 that are not on the agenda. Does anybody have any questions with 1 through 11?
Number 2, immediate.
Number 2, okay.
Do you know what the rate was for last year's refinancing? Was it close, similar, ballpark, or?
I don't recall, but I do know the bond rates have dropped. I do know that.
Number 3, it's the first time we're using Phoenix Advisors.
Phoenix Advisors, the ownership of Capital Financial Advisors is now a partner here, so the Capital Financial closed over, so Mary Lyons from that firm is there. We've had great success with all of our bond refinancing with them, so Mary's done an impeccable job for us, so I'm going to stay with
So
them.
we use one in the past, it's not that.
Right, it's the principal of the firm is there.
Do you have a savings dollar amount on this bond?
I have received one proposal that estimated 1.5. Someone else sent me something estimating 2.9.
Over how many years?
The life, I believe it's another 22 years left, somewhere around there on it. And again, you don't know the final numbers until closing on that day when we sell the bonds, but keep in mind, we cannot move forward unless we can prove we have a net savings of 3%. So the net savings over the life of this must be 3%, otherwise we can't move forward.
What's that 3% dollar amount, do you know?
3%, no, I don't have the report, but it was in, do I have the report? Well, the 3% savings, I'm sorry, 1.5 million.
It's 1.5.
That one is estimating, oh, I'm sorry, the savings is 1.5, but the 3% was, I believe, somewhere around 600,000 or something.
So
Somewhere
it's
around
double.
there. Yeah, they feel comfortable. I mean, the bond market is just ready for it, and we've had great success. The last one we did, last one was a smaller one, but several years ago, we did one for over $1 million. Item number 12, finance number 12. The Board of Education hereby grants SEA grievance number 25-2012 for the revisions I'm sorry, for the reasons stated in the forthcoming letter from the Board of Education to the SCA. Item number 13, the Board of Education hereby denies SCA grievances number 23, 24, 28, 29, 31, 33, 34, 35, 37, 38, and 40-2012 for the reasons stated in the forthcoming letter from the Board of Education to the SCA.
Maybe I'll
Mr.
do it.
DeAndrea?
One
One at a time.
at a time, as I know.
I'll be voting no on number 13, item 40-2012.
If you talk into the microphone, please. He didn't hear you, Donnie.
I'm voting no on number 13, 40-2012.
Okay.
Mr. Brashad? I'll be voting no on grievance number 33-12.
Number 1333-2012.
33.
Okay.
Anyone else? Mrs. Beck?
Yes, I'm going to be voting no on number 24.
13-24, 2012. Number 13.
Amelia,
Mrs. Pinto.
I will be voting no on item number 13, 24-2012, 34-2012, and 40-2012.
And I know Mrs. Beckman.
I'll be voting no on number 24, 34, 37, and 40.
24, 34, 37, and 40.
Yes.
Anyone else? Seeing none? Next item.
Thank you.
Personnel? C?
Personnel, non-certified, there's an unpaid medical leave, a lateral transfer, secretary, some honorarium pay, and substitute list is noted. Any questions with section C? With none, moving to D, personnel certified, there's a resignation. Ms. Castronovo, I want to wish her well. She's had over 20 years in the district and has done very, very well, and I wish her very well in her new position. Pregnancy leave, as noted, an extension of child rearing leaves, there's 2 of those, and a bunch of honorarium payments from the PSAT, and some professional days is listed. Another honorarium that's paid by the College Board, which is number 7, to Ms. Cola, and a couple of new employees that are listed under number 8. Any questions in section D? With none, moving to policy, I will defer to Mr. Syak to give a brief description of the many policies that are in here. Brief description.
Actually,
Description.
I'll make it very simple. The rationale for each policy is right at the end. It's in italics, so I think everyone here can read. I'll let you read them, and I'll take any board member questions. Hearing none, Dr.
Wait,
Alfano,
I
back
have a
to...
question, I just can't find it.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, I can't find which one it was in. It was a lot to do at once. Maybe if I remember the question, I just can't. It was a policy on meetings, if you could tell me which page it was.
Probably towards the back, because I think they're in numerical order, and that's a 9-series meeting.
It must be under your...
9322, it should be page 36, public and executive sessions.
It wasn't underlined, no. Do you know which one was changed on here?
Yeah, they should have been underlined on this. Next to discussion, there were 2 asterisks on the agenda order, and the 2 asterisks don't refer to anything, so I removed the 2 asterisks.
No, that wasn't the one.
And then under public participation, the language that was in there was grievances or complaints that have not been previously considered through administrative channels shall not be acted upon by the board. The previous wording was heard by the board.
Yeah, what page is that one on? That was the one I...
That was page 38. And the main reason for the change on that from shall not be heard by the board to shall not be acted upon by the board was NJSBA recommended a change in language because the fact that you're not going to hear a grievance from someone that's going to come up to the microphone is not exactly inclusive and welcoming. And they suggested that we change it to acted upon so that the board will not act upon it upon initially hearing about it, but they will give the administration an opportunity to address it through the proper administrative channels.
So what you're saying is if an issue comes up here and we want to talk about it, we can't vote on it? If an issue is presented here, is that what that says?
Unless it has been previously considered through administrative channels.
And what does that, how would I know if it was what's the definition of previously gone through the proper channels? What does that mean to me?
Well, depending on the type of issue. I mean, if it's an issue, for example, with a teacher, it should go through the teacher first, then the principal. If they're still not satisfied with the principal, then it would go to the superintendent, then come to us.
Okay, let me just use an example of something we discussed tonight, just to clarify this for me. For example, someone brought up the class trip. Okay, would you say that has already gone through administrative channels or not?
I would say no, because the superintendent is not prepared to make a recommendation on it yet. Correct?
Okay, so what are we exactly changing from what it was to what it's now, if I use that as an example?
That is an example, if someone steps up to the microphone and says, I'd like to ask the board to approve the senior class trip tonight. Under the old language, we could say, I'm sorry, you haven't considered that through administrative channels. Have you spoken to Mr. Brown? Have you spoken to Dr. Alfano? No, you haven't. We will not listen to you. That's under the old one, because we will not hear the grievance. Under the new one, it says that it will not be acted upon. So in other words, unless that individual goes through the principal, the superintendent, and then to us, we will not take a vote on it tonight. Now, we can certainly direct at that point the administration to look into it and come back to us at the next meeting. But we will simply not act on it tonight. The whole premise behind it is to prevent the board from taking action without making sure the proper consideration has been given by the individuals who are most closely involved with the situation and doing the homework.
Okay, but let's just say, for example, like at the last meeting, we talked about the calendar, okay? And the recommendation came, and we changed that. And
That's
there
fine.
were people in the public that said they didn't like it, and we made that change, and we acted upon it that night. Is this changing that?
I would say no, because the calendar itself has already been considered through administrative channels. The discussion was had by the administrative team, a recommendation was brought forth, and we're free to change it. The main thing this is meant to prevent is someone coming up to the microphone and saying, hey, I want a volleyball team. And the Board of Education saying, hey, that's a great idea. And without consideration of budgetary impact, without consideration of how it impacts the extracurricular program at the high school, just granting it.
Right, and we have done that. I remember the middle school baseball team, we did. So that's what you're saying, that could not happen again.
Correct, and it won't happen at that meeting. We're free to direct Dr. Alfano to look at the concept, come back to us at the following meeting with a report, and then we can act on it.
I'm going to vote no on this policy.
That's fine. Correct.
That's the only change, then.
That and removing an asterisk.
So you're,
So it gives us time to digest it, is what I understand.
Correct.
so
Well,
for tonight,
this is the first reading.
This is the first reading.
Next
No,
year,
that gives
next
us-
month. So
but Phyllis is still gonna vote no on policy number 9322.
Right, the first reading, and if I choose, I can vote no on the other ones at the next, if I choose. Because we're going to vote on these again, all of them.
Correct, this is first reading.
Correct. All right, moving to curriculum F. Withdrawn number 1. No HIB reports. Revision in the marking period as listed. Some new curricular as listed. Any questions with that section, F? With none, moving to G, co-curriculum. There is the retroactive approval of a play, the Cerebral War Memorial Cheerleaders Competition, alternate setting for the winter sports season. They're moving it, I believe, to the middle school blue room for the boot camp. Cerebral Middle School Community Service Club sponsor trivia night on December 11th. Wilson Elementary School will have their family night on March 21st. Eisenhower will have their winter tricky tray on January 25th. Olive PTO will have tricky tray on March 1st. And Wilson Elementary Holiday Spectacular Show will be on December 7th. Moving to H, support services. Waive some transportation policy is listed. Some transportation routes as listed. And a board approved another route. And that concludes my report.
Any questions, comments on the agenda items from the board before I open up to the public? Seeing none at this time, I'd like to open up to the public for any questions, comments, or concerns on agenda items only. I will open up again to the public for any business that may come before the board. So at this time, if you have any questions, comments, or agenda items, please come up to the microphone, state your name and address for the record. Ms. Kilcombs.
And I don't have to say my name.
You don't, it's on the record.
Barbara Kilcummins, 22 Schmidt Street. There's several items.
Okay. Just give us a number and a page.
Okay, page 7, number 3, Phoenix Advisors. Do we do, what is it? I get the acronyms wrong, RFP or so on consultants, advisors?
As I explained to Mr. Bowker's question, although it's a new company, it's the same individual that we've already done an RFP for. She just transferred to a different company.
But that's a different company. It could
I
be a
agree with the
different
person.
charge, it could be a different amount.
I'm in agreement, but the person is the same person, so I stayed with them based on the services that person provides.
But her firm could end up charging more, it's just the individual that goes, but isn't she
The
the
fee-
principal
the-
owner of the firm, or,
She's a principal in the firm, yes.
so an RFP is not necessary for them?
No, I didn't.
Is the
Okay.
fee the same?
Excuse me?
Is the fee the same?
Yes.
The fee's the same?
Yes.
Well, I gotta see which. The other item was the resignation of Jackie Castronova. This sort of upsets me. We lost Mrs. Duffy, now we're losing Mrs. Castronova. Is there a problem in the school system or the special ed or morale? It just seems very unusual that 2 key people would leave the special ed department, something as vital as this. So is there an explanation for it or a reason behind it? I know, excuse me, there seems to be a morale problem in the school system. I've told you that many times over the past several years, and I think this board has their head in the sand because they want to deny it, that everything's rosy, everything's okay, fine. But it's just even the amount of teachers that have left and the turnover. How many people have we hired in the last 2 years? That seems to be very unusual where people are looking for jobs, people are, they're in need of teachers, and it was like scrambling to be hired for a teacher. I was the one complaining that we weren't even interviewing local people. Do you recall that? Or interviewing, and very qualified local people. Now I just seem to see as an exodus. So something's vitally wrong with this whole school system here, for so many people to be leaving.
What do you think it is?
I don't know. Might be you, Mr. McEnone. Who knows?
Well, Dr. Fowler, where did Ms. Castronovo go? She was rehired in another district.
Yes, she's moving on to another district.
More money.
And, you know, I tried my best, and his was Duffy as well. They never leave. There was a little part of it, but I did speak to Ms. Castronova, and certainly it is a loss. And, you know, I'm not going to begrudge people from moving on. Also, this is the lowest amount of individuals that have retired this year, and our amount of people that left last year was extremely low too, because I only hired about 45 people. 3 years ago I hired 70, 75. So non-renewals were not as high. So, you know, I don't have
75 replacements?
That was 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago. We had a lot of non-renewals. Last year was only about 40. So, you know, it's down. So I don't know what information you're getting, but certainly the people that are leaving is not as much as it was 3-4 years ago. And that was a combination of a lot of things. I don't know exactly what precipitated that kind of a situation, but could have been a lot of maternities too. So I don't know. But
Did that coincide with the state?
yeah, it was a lot of movement when about 3-4 years ago, when there was a lot of people,
Pension issues?
yeah, a lot of people leaving and you know, looking for jobs, and it was just pretty volatile at that time. But I do the best I can to try to make sure that we put the best people in place and serve
Well,
them.
it possibly couldn't be the salaries, since
Well-
we're one of the lowest around, that could be maybe a major reason too.
I wouldn't argue with that.
Pardon me?
I wouldn't argue with that.
Our administrative positions are high, and they don't seem to have a turnover, but good quality personnel, I think is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Is anyone else from the public like to speak on agenda items only? Seeing none.
Third-party administrators should adhere to the same expectations of course rigor and grading expectations and the academic material quality as it would be if it was a regular, either online course offered directly by the college or an online course offered, or a classroom course offered directly by the college. So that was the main item worth of discussion, and the resolution was ultimately approved. Following that, I had an opportunity to talk with some of my colleagues there regarding the move to November election, which I know is also on our agenda later today. And I asked many of them how it went and what the issues were that they faced, and benefits, etc. The items that they had highlighted to me that they saw in their own district were a few things. Number one, they saw in one particular county, the county clerk decided to put the school board election in the bottom left-hand corner of the ballot. And in some communities that were particularly Democratic or particularly Republican, the lineup happened to coincide with column A or column B. So the individuals who voted in particularly primary Democratic or Republican communities just went straight down the line and ended up voting for school board members who may have not necessarily been Democrats or Republicans simply because of the ballot position. So I know Dr. Feinsod, the executive director, was going to send a letter to that particular county clerk advising him of that situation and asking him to change that for the future.
So that was 1 out of 500.
That was one county out of 21 counties that had that issue. Candidates did report having to spend a lot more money to get noticed simply because of the larger pool of people that were voting in an effort to get the word out. They also said that they felt that ballot position was a large concern, in particular being across the top, because with a larger group of people coming out to vote, and if they didn't know the school board candidates, they tended to just go across the first row and pick those individuals. They haven't gotten an official percentage yet, they're still waiting on that, but all indications are that the increased voter turnout did not necessarily go all the way down to the school board election level. They did see an increase much higher than the 12 or 13%, but it wasn't anywhere near as high as the presidential election or the senators or even the town council. I'm waiting for official figures on that. I spoke to Dr. Feinsod, the executive director, and keep in mind NJSBA is also helping other districts recover from the hurricane. But I did say to him that, although we're not a majority, there are 20 or 40 districts in the state which still have their elections in April, many of whom are reevaluating, and they're preparing a report for us to look at with all of this type of detail. And I encouraged him to get that information to us as quickly as possible. I drafted a sample letter in the event that the board tonight still wishes for more information. If that is the case, I would advise the board to allow Mr. McEnone to send that letter to Dr. Feinsod, basically encouraging him from the board perspective of saying, look, we really need this information, it's important. Obviously, if the board can come to a decision tonight, either way, then the letter is moved. But I'll pass the draft out. You can read it as we get to the next item. So that covers the November election. NJSBA and NSBA are both hard at work with regard to the sequestration and fiscal cliff issues. The fiscal cliff being the expiration of the Bush tax cuts and the payroll tax adjustment, whereby we're all going to be paying more on payroll taxes come January 1. which also is resulting in the sequestration piece whereby there's a flat across the board cut to all federal spending effective January 1. We've got a campaign going on the latter, basically saying that, look, we understand there's a deficit problem, but at the same time, we can't just apply an across-the-board cut without any respect or any consideration given to where those cuts are going. So we're basically looking for bipartisan leadership on the level, at the congressional level, to look at this realistically as opposed to just letting a default formula take place. Cereval's already passed a resolution. We were one of the first. Many districts have been following, and those districts are being updated on NSBA's website. If you want more information on that, you can go to www.nsba.org. And the last piece, which is actually some good news, I've got an opportunity come March, from March 7th to 17th, to join 23 other educators, 4 of them who are officers of the National School Boards Association, on a trip under the direction of the Northern Kentucky University College of Education and Human Services to Finland, to look at, in particular, their public schools for a week and study at the University of Helsinki. Now, some of you might be wondering, why Finland, especially in March when it's 30 degrees. Finland, if you don't know, has had like the last decade of outstanding educational achievement. And the thing that makes it remarkable is when you look at Finland, all of the things that they're doing are basically the antithesis to a lot of the U.S. education proposals. For example, students there start at a much later age. Students there take fewer classes. They enjoy a 3-month summer break. They spend less time in school each day, and they're rarely tested. Teachers are rarely evaluated. Teachers have strong unions, and teachers earn average salaries. And our knowledge all says that those things run counter to what we traditionally think would drive student achievement. And they've been able to successfully do it and sustain it, and a lot of what they're doing comes from the culture that they establish for their teachers, the culture that they establish for their students. And school boards in particular can have a profound impact on the culture of a school district in terms of how we adopt a strategic plan, in terms of what we task our administration to do, in terms of what we ourselves spend a lot of time focusing on. So I'm very interested to go there and see what they're doing in terms of governance to drive that type of culture within their school district and how that would benefit Cereval. And then on a larger perspective, a lot of our culture in U.S. schools is also driven by the federal government and the state government. What can the National School Boards Association do to help the federal government and the state government drive that culture as well, so that we're not in this constant cram and test methodology, and we're focused more on the long-term effects of education. So I'm in the middle of several books preparing for the course, and I'll have more to follow. I'll try to keep the board abreast as we go forward on that.
Find out how they pay for their schools.
I will find out how they pay for their schools as well.
Okay, thank you for that detailed analysis. Anybody have any issue with the letter that Mr. Sayak has presented to us?
Perfect.
Okay.
There's an original for you to sign.
Next issue is under discussion. So there's no committee reports. Any committees meet? I don't think we had any committee meetings. Okay, discussion. Mr. Sayak had introduced the school board elections. As you know, how many school districts moved in last year? Do you know? It was over 500.
I think like 87%.
87%. And we did not do that. And I want to discuss with the board again the possibility of Cereval moving our school board elections from April to November. Mr. DeAndre, can you just give us an estimate of what does it cost us to hold that separate election in April? About.
I'm going to say that we were probably charged in the neighborhood of around $30,000 between the county and the municipal.
It includes the poll workers, security?
Yes, all the buildings, yes, somewhere around that, off the top.
We would still have to contribute if it was moved to November, not 30,000, but
The understanding is there would be some cost. I can't even tell you what the estimate would be, because I didn't experience, so I do not know.
Would you be able to call some of your colleagues and find out what they, ones that moved in November, ones that, what they were billed? I know every district is different, but at least give us a feel if we're talking 20,000, 200, or...
I can call you. I mean, I know a few neighboring towns.
If you recall last year, I had made a motion to actually move the elections to November, and no one had seconded. So that didn't allow us to have any discussion about it. My feeling then was, for those that don't know, that if you did move the school board elections from April to November to coincide with municipal elections, then the school budget would not be up for public vote as long as it's within the 2% cap. And it's always been my feeling that the most important thing is the school budget getting passed. I think more particularly this year, because I don't think anyone believes that taxes this year are probably going to be, from the municipal level, increased due to the storm. And there are a number of houses that are no longer on the tax rolls, and certainly the municipality has incurred significant overtime pay, providing security, Department of Public Works, and so on. So I think it jeopardizes the school board budget, and the state has allowed us that if we move the elections, as long as we were under the 2% tax levy, that we were authorized to do that. That's always been my motivation, and that is still my motivation, regardless whether I was running or not. So that's my 2 cents and discussion.
I'd like to wait until we have more information from New Jersey school boards to see what the data is on it, so I can make an informed decision.
What data, I guess, what would they provide?
I'd
This
like
is
to
what I'm
hear
asking.
their reports.
Well, I think one of the things they'll provide is the actual turnout, what they saw in terms of actual voter turnout for the election as a whole versus the school board section. Any challenges that they encountered throughout all 21 counties. What corrective action they're taking to address those issues, the items that can be corrected, the items that can't be corrected, and other concerns that boards may need to be aware of if they move it. For example, has there been an increase in candidate spending? Has there been an increase in political interference?
There's probably interference now.
I mean, and I don't really know what they're, what they're gonna research, because I haven't been asked, because we haven't moved. So I mean, I know they're looking for data from districts which have moved. Again, we haven't moved, so I wouldn't expect to get a survey that says, what do you think about the elections being held in November?
I know all our surrounding districts, I think the only 2 districts in Middlesex County, is Metuchen in Middlesex County?
Yes.
They didn't move it, and we didn't move it.
And one other.
Also, Edison didn't move.
Edison didn't move it. The other.
And I think Cranberry didn't move as well.
Cranberry may not have also.
So there would be 3.
Did we hear anything from the other districts in the county that was negative that? I think if you talk to school board members that were incumbents that were not elected, they point at something wrong with the election because they moved it. So I don't know how valid or informative that information is going to be. I have no problem waiting for it. What is the last time? What is our deadline? Do you know, Counselor? That we have to make the decision.
It's a date in March. I don't know what it would be this year based, I'd have to subtract out the number of days, but it's a date, it would be a date in March.
So the date of the petition filing, we'd have to do it right before that. Because the petition filing would be early March, late April. Oh, it's early March, late February.
Actually, the board petitions are usually due late February.
Right, but the deadline for moving the election, I believe, is in March. I'm not on statute here, but it's of course.
And we don't want to wait that long.
Right.
Didn't we have to decide in February last year? Wasn't there a deadline in February?
It may have been, and that's something that Jonathan and I discussed, and in all honesty, we're having some IT problems because emails have been lost on my end, so.
Can we find out?
Yeah, I'll get you an answer tomorrow.
Okay.
On this.
How
But
could the deadline be after the filing petition deadline?
That's when we're not
How would that work?
The statutory scheme is not exactly sensible, as I recall. I haven't looked at this
Yes.
in a while. I crafted yeah, right, I mean, but I will get you an answer tomorrow. If I can't find something right now, for example, on my BlackBerry, I'll start looking.
I remember last year there was discussion because the petitions had to be filed so early for the people that moved it. Was that ever changed or addressed?
I don't recall, I do recall there was something that was changed for them, because now it moved out to November, they had a different deadline, but the problem became, since it was no longer under the control of the district, it moved over to the county, so the BAs were not really in the loop, but I do believe the petitions signing was also moved, but don't hold me to that. But Mr. McEnon, if I could, amongst my association, we did have a conversation after the election, and it seemed that from the business administrator's perspective, they found that board members worked more diligently together to bring their budgets in under that 2% cap, knowing that they moved it, and they said they found more of board involvement in the budget process. knowing that they had to meet that 2% cap. So from that perspective, it seemed that board members may have been a little more involved because they knew they had to get to that 2% and worked hard to make sure they got there and got the things in their budgets that they needed. That's the feedback I know I heard from the business administration.
I would think it's safe to say that many, if it wasn't for the budget, districts probably would not have moved the election to November.
I'm going to tell you that's the biggest thing. And I can say, I know over the years here, we've always tried to control that number. And this board, for the purpose of budget, I mean, we're there. So that's the motivation. I mean, we're really there. I mean, last year we barely went out with a 2% budget. So we meet those mandates. So if that's one of the main reasons, I mean, it's a good reason to go because we're already there. We've never gone to those other numbers that they've allowed us. So, you know, that 2%, and they strive hard for it. It's the feedback that I've heard from my colleagues, that they were more involved and more engaged in it.
I would also like to know of those, the Metuchen, Cranberry, and Edison,
Yes.
did they pass their budgets?
I can tell you, the Touching, because I live there, the answer is yes. And I can tell you Edison, the answer is yes. By a slim margin, the last 2 years have passed.
And I would assume Cranberry, yes.
But I don't know. I represent Metuchen, I represent Edison, I live in
I spoke with the Metuchen Board Vice President 2 days ago, and they're a district factor group of I.
Metuchen?
Yes.
Yes.
And they have passed, he said, I think 19 budgets in a row or something to that effect. A little different comparing apples to
Perhaps
apples.
one of the reasons my property taxes are so high.
Again, I think it's something that's prudent to do, to protect the budget. I think that outweighs anything. Even if the data comes back, I think it's going to be skewed because this is a presidential election. I don't know if that's a good election in which to take a look at this. But I don't know of anything that could come back from that to convince me that we shouldn't move it to protect the budget. I really don't. That's always been my motivation. I think that's what's very important. Tom, you're pretty quiet back there. I hope I didn't
First
break
of
this.
all, what Mrs. Backo asked, petitions had to be out in June of last year. That was when the petitions had to be filed.
For the November
For the
election.
November election, that's correct.
Okay, well, my question was, did
What do
they
you
change
mean?
that?
Yes, that's being changed right now. They changed it after, and I believe it's going sometime in September. They have to be filed by now.
What's your thoughts on moving the election, Tom?
What was my thoughts last year?
No, what are your thoughts now?
No, well, they're the same as last year. The answer is no. We're taking away the right to vote from people. And I can't do that, you know. You know, pretty soon, we're a democracy. Again, I restate that, and people have a right to vote, on if they accept it or reject it. My theory last year was if we present an honest, true budget, that people will vote for it, and they did vote for it.
Carl?
I agree with Tom says with the allowing people to vote. Can you imagine, Mr. McEnroe, if you took Mrs. Cummings right away to vote?
She might come to the microphone.
So I say we stay in April.
Well, it's not my intention, obviously, to take, any
I
vote away, but
understand.
it's state law that says that we can do that as long as we meet the cap, so. But I understand. Mrs. Backo, I think I know, but go ahead. Yeah.
I haven't changed.
Haven't changed, so you would be not moved. Okay, and reason would be,
Well, for some of these, for example, and I think this is going to be part of the problem, one of the questions that Kevin brought up about the line and how people vote. And I question whether an uninformed voter is better than no voter. So if people are going to go in and vote down a line or just vote eeny, meeny, miny, mo, are we gaining anything by getting more people in there? So and you're always going, you don't want to use a presidential election as a guide, but every 4 years you're going to have one.
Right.
So once you move it, you have to move it for every election. And I just, I don't know, I was a little surprised. I thought the percentage would be higher. Kevin doesn't seem to think it's as drastic as it is. I thought the percentage would go up. But I'm sure if you remember reading about Carteret, what happened, I wouldn't want to see that happen here. And that's my biggest fear, what happened there, what happened here.
Mrs. Burns.
My reasons for staying in April haven't changed. I'm concerned about the political influence. I need more data to make an informed decision about how the elections went this year.
I'm with Mr. Kuya on the data piece. I think I am more open to it in terms of moving it to November this year than I was last year for a few reasons.
I can think of one.
Let me, since you threw that out there, let me address it. First of all, if we move the election, it's a 4-year commitment. So any one of us here, no matter when we move it, is going to be subject to a November election.
True.
So whether we're up this year or last year or whatever, that to me is irrelevant, because sooner or later, we're gonna fall under it. But in terms of my rationale, number one, I had a large number of people who came up to me saying, why didn't you move it? I had a lot of feedback on that one. The other one was, when I looked at the voter turnout for the April election, the turnout plummeted. Now, I don't know if that was a result of people not being informed. I don't know if that was a result of people trying to send us a message that says this is ridiculous and we don't want you to hold it in April anymore. But, I mean, our voter turnout was probably the worst that we've ever seen in April. Which, and again, I'm not sure what I take away from that, but to me, that was a message. And then the other part that I look at, we try to prevent the political involvement, and I agree, one of the reasons for not moving it, which is still a concern for me, is the whole Carteret situation, which was cited. But then when you look at my election, I had my own issue with an anonymous flyer that violated election law. And it's much easier to do something like that with an election that draws a very small amount of people than it is for a much larger election. And if you can ever pin down who did it, it's probably a much bigger crime during a November election than it is during a small school board election. So for those reasons, I'm more open to it, but I still haven't made up my mind yet, and I would like to see that.
Okay, so we're going to work on a date, we're going to get a definitive date when we have to. Mrs. Trapp?
I'm also open to moving it. I'm not quite sure how strongly I feel about it, but I definitely want to, we need to do more homework on it. And once we get the data back, that I'll seriously consider it. And the 4-year commitment, I'm nervous about that still. That we would, if we move it, we would change it for 4 years. We would be stuck with that change for 4 years, even if we don't like it. So.
Mr. Sabal?
I still am against moving it. I still remember that packet of flyers Kevin brought in last year. It showed us, what we have to compete against. And I can remember driving down Cranberry Road this past October. I saw my daughter counted 34 signs for the mayor of East Brunswick. I saw Menendez signs. I saw other signs. In that mix, I think I saw 3 Board of Ed signs for one particular person. I can't compete with that, and I can't go hiring buses to pick up people and run the polls. And politics would just be too counterproductive to moving it.
But is that more important than the budget? I guess that's what I always come down to,
That's where I thought, I agree with Tom. We put a good budget together, we work hard, we spend it on what we're supposed to, on items we need. We work it and we'll get the votes.
Mr. Pinto?
My concerns that I had last year for not moving it, I still have those same concerns.
Which were?
Political influence, taking the right to vote away from the voters. We put the right to vote out there this year. They voted for the budget. We must have done something right, and I have confidence that we can do it again. I'm willing to look at the data you'll bring forward, but right now I really have those concerns still.
Okay.
Mr. Magnon, I've completed your research assignment with respect to the date that the board needs to act prior to moving the elections in November. The law, of course, I knew there was something nonsensical about it, I haven't looked at it in a while, and the answer is there is nothing in the law that says by when the date is that the board actually should act. Last year, if I remember, boards were acting all the way into March for the April election to move into November, but we recommend, which makes the most sense, obviously, that the board act on this prior to the deadline for submission of petitions. So that would be February, a date in February, not March like I previously said.
Well, I think we're all over the place. I think just from listening to everybody that the data comes back favorable, that there were big problems, that we still may not have the votes due to the taking the budget bill away. So, but we'll revisit it. I think when we get the data, fair enough. I think we had a good discussion. It'll be interesting to hear what the public has to say when I open it up. Any other discussion before I open up to the public? Seeing none at this time, I'd like to open up to the public for any business may come before the board. If you're interested in making any comments, please come up, state your name and address for the record.
Bergkamp Civic Car, 126 Windingwood Drive. As a cadet captain at the Cerebral Emergency Squad, I've been working on a project in drawing with Mr. Kaiserman at the TV studio here at the high school. Officially, until now, it's been officially a Cerebral Emergency Squad production, and I'm actually here to see if the board can make it a Cerebral Board of Education production for, we can get it out there easier with the TV production. Mr. Kaiserman refuses at this moment to work with the Cerebral Emergency Squad to distribute this video. Before I get into all that though, I'll get into an overview of the project. On January 13th, as is scheduled right now, I would like to film a drinking and driving public service announcement. This shoot will consist of a controlled car accident, extrication and rescue, and skills of our auxiliary police officers. It will be completely supervised by trained professionals from the Department of Public Works and representatives from Mega Dismantling Corporation, which are experts on car collision scenarios. Just nervous.
Okay, take that, fine. We get you.
And so far, I've spoken to the fire chiefs, the EMS chiefs, and auxiliary police officer Barsley. They've all been compliant up to this point. They've all offered their volunteer services for the project. We will have fire crews and EMTs on standby in case anything does go wrong. We've also had many donations come in from both on money-wise and like porta potties. We've also had food donations. We also have a warming shelter set up. I would like to shoot on Cerebral Boulevard, right by River Road, the intersection of Route 15 at that end. We've spoken to local residents and business owners in that area. They're all compliant. They know that shoot might possibly be happening. So they're all compliant with that. So I'm here to request that the board approves that this would be a Board of Education project rather than a Cerebral Emergency Squad project. So I can actually be able to distribute it to the state more easily.
So you're a student of Mr. Kaiserman?
Yes.
As a TV Comtech class? And you want to do a training video, is that?
Well, it's a public service announcement.
Okay, and Mr. Kaiserman doesn't want to do it?
No, what he does, but he wants to work with South Amboy. But I want to keep this in Cerebral because I want this to be a Cerebral thing. I want this to show what we're capable of.
This is not something the board can approve, to direct a teacher to do something.
Oh, well, it's not that exactly, because he doesn't want to do it with the school necessarily, but I want to do it as a school project.
Okay. Well, then what we have to do is go to administrative channels with Mr. Brown, who is the school principal. Have you spoken to him at all?
My understanding from what Mr. Kaiserman told me that he spoke to Ms. Riley, the
supervisor
for the TV department, and she spoke to Mr. Brown. And I guess there was some lack of communication between me and Mr. Kaiserman, but I believe that they're aware of the project.
You know, why don't you give me your, make it simple, why don't you just give me your name? I'm gonna go talk to Mr. Brown, because I didn't get your name when you originally spoke it, and I'll talk to Mr. Brown, I'll make sure he contacts you.
Okay.
And you'll definitely get an audience with Mr. Brown, because it's kind of sketchy what you want to do too, I'm not 100% sure. So this way, Mr. Brown can maybe get some of the other EMS actually involved and everybody else. So why don't you just write down your name here.
Right here?
Yeah, print it. What grade are you in?
I'm a senior.
You're a senior, okay.
Nice job.
Nice
No
presentation.
trouble, perfect.
Thank you for your time, guys.
Your dead cat, that's a lot of rain. Thank you. Anybody else from the public like to speak?
Barbara Kilcummins. I just want to thank the acknowledgement of Rita Whitney, because many times we're remiss here about not acknowledging former employees and all. She happened to be a friend of mine, and she was a great disciplinarian. In fact, there was a comment in her obituary, and I felt like my son wrote it. He had her in two of my sons in grammar school, middle school, and high school. And she followed right through each one, and he expected her to be in his dorm as his dorm mother when they got to college. But she was a great disciplinarian and a great asset to the community. But I just want to thank you for acknowledging her. And also, I agree about not putting the election back to November. For people that run for the board, it's very, very difficult. And it would be politicizing them. And I recall, Mr. Syak, when you brought all those flyers, and how do you compete with that? And how do you get your message across as a candidate, and if you're the right candidate for the board? And even if there is a 2% cap, that doesn't satisfy me. I still think the public has the right. In fact, I would even want to vote, rather, on the budget. I would recommend them putting the budget downtown on Main Street on a ballot
Oh, yeah.
for the public. Seriously, and how they spend their money too. So to take it away, I think is wrong. I think you should just keep it in the spring, regardless of the amount. It's separate. Then if you risk of it being totally political. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clemens. Anyone else from the public like to speak? Seeing none at this time, take a motion for adjournment.
Second.
Next